Hello everyone and welcome to Great Games Before Your Time, Year 1 in Review. I can't believe that it's been an entire year, and yet here we are 1 year later and Great Games Before Your Time is still going strong. A few of my Year 1 goals included the following. Get 5 YouTube subscribers, which honestly, I blew that out of the water. In fact, I am over 2% of the way before I can start making money on YouTube. So guess what that means? I am on pace to start earning money on YouTube by 2059. Another goal I had for my first year was to have a reasonably stable schedule to stream on Twitch. However, it doesn't look like that is going to be highly feasible. Maybe during my second year I will be able to stream live more on Twitch. Originally, I was posting approximately 5 videos per week on YouTube, which honestly was way too many. I reduced this to 4, and then at some point during the year I decided that this number honestly should be reduced to 3 videos per week. But let's have a brief summary and recap of all of the games that I played this year during my year 1 and uploaded to YouTube. There were 3 consoles that were represented. The original Nintendo Entertainment Center, the Super Nintendo, and then finally the Nintendo 64. And of course, if I am representing and claiming to be great games before your time, what is the #1 absolute first video game I would ever play and record and stream? Super Mario Bros. But we didn't stop there. After that, I buzzed through Super Mario Bros. 2, and then also Super Mario Bros. 3. Now it is true that I very briefly sat down and played a little showcase of Zelda 1 and 2, but honestly I'm not even going to count that because A, I didn't finish it, B, it was really only 1 setting per game. Now for Super Nintendo, I began with Super Mario World, and then Super Mario World 2, also known as Yoshi's Island because that is the subtitle, Super Mario Kart, Donkey Kong Country 1, Donkey Kong Country 2, and Donkey Kong Country 3, and then perhaps surprisingly I played the very licensed game Jurassic Park, which honestly is pretty fun and a game that I do physically own, and then finally Super Mario RPG. Then it was time to show some love to my Nintendo 64 collection, at which point I played Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Diddy Kong Racing, Space Station Silicon Valley, Pokemon Snap, Star Fox 64, Banjo-Kazooie, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and then finally Jet Force Gemini. So just to have a few general comments first, I would say that obviously when I first began, all of the Nintendo games, the quality of my videos for all of the Nintendo games were pretty much garbage. Now it is true you have to begin somewhere, and if I wanted to sit down and make something that was actually, not garbage content, I would have sat down and played Super Mario Bros. And then learned how to video edit and would have not been happy, and then I would have re-recorded it, I would have replayed it, and then I would have learned more video editing tricks and tips, and I still wouldn't have been happy with it, and then I would have replayed it again, and then I would have learned more, and then I would have replayed it again and recut it again. And once you do this, it would have probably taken me an entire year to acquire some necessary skills of video editing and whatnot, and have a good standard of quality when it comes to a video series. But we would have had a situation in which I would have spent an entire year doing almost 1 single YouTube video until I got it to a quality which I would have been happy with. Now honestly, it would have been completely unpractical and unfeasible to spend an entire year learning how to video edit, record, have professional setup, OBS, operations, just to make 1 single YouTube video. So I liken the amount of recording and content that I had to deal with kind of like falling down or rolling down a mountain. You can make incremental progress, but the thing is, gravity is taking you down, and you can only do so much in a finite amount of time. So specifically looking at some editing improvements, every single series and every single video was able to be improved in some way. Not only that, some of the early series were almost more or less entire playthrough dumps, and honestly just way too much content. There are some things that do need to be edited out. Let's cut out the boring parts, let's cut out the parts that don't apply. But like I said, you have to start somewhere. So as I began to learn how to use various video editing techniques, I was able to incrementally improve the quality of every single video. Now, even from the very beginning, I had envisioned in my mind an introductory and then outgoing little jingle that I could play at the very beginning and very end of every single one of my YouTube videos. Thankfully, with each passing video, I was able to slightly improve upon that concept in itself in having an introductory image or an outgoing image. So I thought it was a lot of fun once I kind of got into the groove of using Photoshop and being a graphic designer, to be able to design a beautiful intro and outro image, sometimes the same, sometimes different, in order to thank the viewer for watching, and also to set the stage at the beginning of the video. Hilariously enough, my very first videos, I had no thumbnails for. It wasn't until I got to the game Super Mario World in which I began actually sitting down and designing a thumbnail. In an effort to try to save a little time, because remember we're just falling down that mountain, I wanted to essentially combine the work of making a beautiful thumbnail into making a beautiful intro image. This is a great idea and sometimes works very well. However, when it comes to a thumbnail, obviously a thumbnail is going to be very small and the various objects on the thumbnail need to be very large. So you might notice that overall the quality of the thumbnails as well as the intro and outro images have improved from video to video and series to series. My year 2 goals are to continuously improve on this aspect as well. Speaking of improving, I was also able to improve my actual recording equipment. When I first started here, I was just using my computer in my room. As I was able to progress, however, it became clear that I needed a different setup. So this included me relocating, this included me having different setups as far as how far am I away from my screen, how far away am I from the TV, how far away am I from the webcam, how far away am I from my speaker, and eventually I also got professional lighting umbrellas and a green screen background so that my webcam face does not detract from the overall video presentation. A few general comments regarding the various video series. When I first started, obviously the Nintendo games were pretty rough around the edges. These were all of my learning episodes in which really I first had to learn how to even export a video. So when you're dealing with such a low amount of knowledge, really you are at the very bottom and you gotta work your way up from there. So in addition to one particular series, Super Mario Bros., in which I was on like this tutorial lecture sort of mode, explaining every little tiny detail in the game, that was even worse in the Super Mario World series. As I've referenced many times throughout my videos, I have been working on a Super Mario World ROM hack, and the amount of knowledge that I have about the inside and the guts of that game is astronomical. And in fact, a lot of my commentary during Super Mario World was based around various ROM hack and ROM hack knowledge, which, don't get me wrong, is interesting in its own context. However, I think as a video series, it failed because my Super Mario World playthrough series should have been more focused on the actual gameplay and levels. I was pretty happy with the Donkey Kong Country trilogy games, as I was also learning a lot of more editing techniques, for example, scene or split scene transitions. So these effects added a little bit of life as well as some flair to the overall presentation of those games. I was also pretty proud of myself because those are viewed as difficult games, and I was able to just pick them up after years of not playing and not only one-shot almost the entire game, but almost one-shot all of the bonus secret areas as well. Those entire playthroughs were muscle memory, and even though I was editing out various points of that to focus on the completion of the individual levels, not that much footage got cut. On a sad note, no matter what I do and no matter what I say, I can't motivate the kiddos, also known as my nieces and nephews, to watch my Donkey Kong Country Trilogy series. Maybe after they watch this, they'll give it a try. If we look at a couple of the racing games I did, such as Super Mario Kart, Mario Kart 64, and then Diddy Kong Racing, it's honestly hard to present a racing game. Thankfully, I don't play very many racing games, because I think overall, any sort of presentation you have with racing games just plain and simply has too much content. All of my video series up to Pokemon Snap were heavily non-edited. That is, very little of the actual footage was ever cut. And I think the root cause of that, honestly, is that I'm a very patient person. And so even as I watched my own playthrough, I could sit down and patiently watch it from beginning to end, including all of the deaths, the failures, etc. When I watched the Final Cut YouTube video, again, I could patiently sit down and watch it. But I think there's an intrinsic problem with having too much content that honestly just plain and simply needs to be cut out sometimes. So once I got to Star Fox 64, I was still doing full dump video series. Essentially the entire playthrough, the entire raw video was in the final video. However, with Star Fox 64, that is one action-packed game. So then the best thing that ever happened to me is trying to do Pokemon Snap after Star Fox 64. Because even someone as patient as myself, as I was able to sit down and watch and rewatch all of my Star Fox 64 footage, when I get to the Pokemon Snap footage, I am absolutely bored to tears. And so that's kind of the shift in focus, and then when my video series drastically started to improve. I would actually say that I started to hit my stride when I cut my Space Station Silicon Valley series. And speaking of that game, it is too bad that it is such an unknown, obscure game, because even though it was extremely fun to play, and my overall series is pretty decent, virtually no one is ever going to watch it, even if I was a super famous YouTuber. By virtue of all of my content, you would look and see, oh, like this game, I know this game, or oh, I've played this game, or oh, I'm interested in this game, and people would watch those series. But when people saw this game, Space Station Silicon Valley, never heard of it, they would just pass over it. And honestly, that's a tragedy in itself, because not only is that game awesome, but there's so many great moments in that video series. One final general comment regarding Banjo-Kazooie. I tried my best to insert as much humor as I could throughout whilst playing the game, and then when I was making the final YouTube cut videos, to insert more humor or sarcasm. But honestly, Banjo-Kazooie, without me at all, is plain and simply the absolute funniest game out of all of them that I played this entire year. So I would highly recommend checking that series out. Especially if you're having a bad day, it was absolutely hilarious for me to watch all of the pain and suffering that I had to go through on a couple particularly difficult, horrible pieces of garbage level that you just want to punch the developers in the face. Now, when it comes to my absolute favorite moments, here are a few that I would like to share. So first, here are a few honorable mentions, which I will categorize as effects. Typically, I would have a vision or an idea going into a specific YouTube video. Like, I could remember the footage, I remembered points that I could accentuate or the story that I could tell. But every once in a while, an idea would not hit me until I was editing the video, and I would think to myself, you know, that would be a good idea to do this. Such as in Jet Force Gemini, there is an area where Lupus obtains night vision goggles. So the screen is completely in night vision, however my overlay is in its full color, which honestly looked pretty bad. And so I thought to myself, you know, it would look really cool if I made the overlay that same tinted green, and thus began a quest to fade everything into the same night vision green color during that section in the game. Now, an example like that just kind of illustrates sometimes a lot of work goes into something that honestly, a lot of people might not even notice. An honorable mention number 2 is the ending to a certain Zelda Ocarina of Time video. When playing the Water Temple, Link gets to a dark reflection of himself, and I love this aspect of the game so much that I kind of wanted to pay a little tribute to that. So as I was designing my intro/outro images for that video series, I knew I wanted to have the Zen-like water room, but as I worked and I decomposed and disassembled various layers, the idea hit me to have this beautiful fade-out effect at the end of the video. Another thing that I really loved as far as in the honorable mention effects category is the fact that I could take a standard. For example, at the beginning of every single video I wanted to have this specific jingle. At the end of every video I wanted to have this specific outgoing jingle. However, in some contexts, in some situations, with some video games, I could even customize this. It somewhat reminded me of various movies. The movie doesn't start until the movie starts, right? Most of the time. We have hundreds of movies from, say, MGM where we get to see the lion roaring to begin with. We have hundreds of Warner Bros. Movies that have the Warner Bros. Icon. We have hundreds of 20th Century Fox movies in which we have that absolutely classic 20th Century Fox music and intro video. But you might notice that every once in a while there's a movie that is so epic in scope that they actually start with the ambience before the movie starts. So for example, at the beginning of The Matrix, we have our little Warner Bros. Screen that's already tinted green. With V for Vendetta, we have that V for Vendetta effect before the movie starts. With Minority Report, we have that completely washed out, cold color and grainy effect that you see present in the entire movie. Similarly, for Space Station Silicon Valley, the outro jingle is different by virtue of that game has a nearly perfect outro jingle in its own that I can customize. Now here are my top 5 favorite moments of the entire year. This idea hit me late as I was making my Super Mario RPG series. In the sunken ship, we come across this puzzle. And very interestingly, I say something to the effect of, "Hey, with all of the hints, have you figured out the puzzle yet?" And I actually realized that no viewer would be able to decode and solve the puzzle because I had never shown on screen the actual letters from which you are choosing with the clues. So I very painstakingly put together a beautiful little image and little montage of all of the clues as well as the letters with some great Professor Layton background puzzle music, allowing the player to pause for as long as they want and look at the puzzle, or they could just let it play or even skip and be able to see the solution to the puzzle. My fourth favorite moment is probably one of the first montages I ever did. Unfortunately, it is for Diddy Kong Racing, which is probably my longest video series. Now, having played the game, I knew that I had significant trouble in the Silver Coin Challenge in Greenwood Village. And so all throughout the video series, I built up to that moment like a harbinger. And then we get to the final moment where I am at my wit's end and I have this beautiful montage. Honestly, that was probably the first time that I used hyperspeed video, which I still had a lot to learn. So even this montage itself could have been improved, but I did the best that I could with the knowledge that I possessed at that time. But essentially the montage is the following. I start playing this level and it goes faster and it goes faster and it goes faster, and my frustration and anguish and suffering and depression gets worse and worse and worse until hours go by and I am so dejected. This was one of the first games that I was really defeated by. Up to that point, my muscle memory, I was able to almost one-shot every single level, every single game, but that was the first time where I had some true pain. And what can I say? It was pretty entertaining to watch. My third favorite moment of year one was a Zelda Ocarina of Time video, specifically my Biggoron Sword quest montage. I did pretty much every single side quest in that game. However, that entire series was only a presentation of the story. Everything else didn't make the final YouTube cut. But I thought it would be really weird if I suddenly went from using the Master Sword to using this giant Biggoron sword without any sort of explanation. My second favorite moment is going to sound like I'm cheating a little bit because I would say it's the entire Jet Force Gemini series. Jet Force Gemini was definitely the funnest game, my favorite out of all of the ones that I played during my first year. Not only was that game pure joy to play, I loved watching all of the raw video footage, I loved presenting the story, I loved creating the final YouTube cut videos, I loved designing everything about them. I loved designing the intro images, the outro images, the thumbnails. I loved designing the introductory video sounds. You might notice that my introductory jingle is completely different for Jet Force Gemini, because on that game, when you turn the power on, you hear this beautiful music to fire you up. I wanted that captured in the beginning of every single one of my videos. Similarly, when you accomplish a mission in Jet Force Gemini, I used that music as the outgoing music. And not only did I love the entire Jet Force Gemini series, but I had a lot of fun making the epilogue episode as well. Speaking of epilogue episodes, my absolute #1 favorite moment of the entire year one is my Star Fox 64 epilogue episode. It's one of those moments where everything just comes together and just clicks. It's a beautiful montage of me progressing through the hard mode campaign just so I can have one shot at the hard Venom level so that I can beat it deathless true ending. And what certainly helps is the absolutely beautiful music to go along with that montage. So in closing, thank you so much for watching this specific video. If any of the games that we reviewed in this year one video appeal to you, you can go check them out, or you can continue to wait patiently as I have a full year planned ahead of me for year two. But until next time, this is Great Games Before Your Time.